welcome everyone to our latest webinar called Smarter Re-engagement. Here we've got a great panel of speakers who I'll introduce in a second, and we're really going to dive into really unpacking re-engagement and the best approaches for it. Start off a little bit of a boring one, but important, just a bit of housekeeping. So for those of you attending, the audience, you'll be muted throughout. However, we do have a chat box that you should be seeing on your screen. Please utilize that for any questions that you'd like to ask. Do so throughout as and when they crop up. We've allotted some time at the end for a Q&A section where we'll be able to dig into those. There is a recording of this session we're currently recording, and we'll be able to share that with you afterwards. And as always, please feel free to reach out to us. The email is here, marketing@M+C-Saatchi-Performance.com, to find out more. We always love speaking to you guys, whether it's about re-engagement or anything to do with media. We'll share that email at the end again as well. But yeah, let's meet the speakers. So to start off, I'm Megan Price. I'm a programmatic strategy and planning director at M+C Saatchi Performance. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm British. I worked in the London office for 4 years alongside Josh, and moved over to the New York office almost 3 years ago to the day, in case the very New York brick background didn't give that one away. Have a sort of background in media buying and planning, and over the last couple of years have started to specialize in all things programmatic. And then I'll pass over to Arti first to introduce herself, and we've also got a very fun icebreaker question for all of our speakers to answer, which is, if you had to describe great customer retention in one word, what would it be? So Arti, over to you.
Yeah, sorry, taking myself off mute there. Have I had to describe re-engagement in one word? One word's hard. Can I have a hyphen?
You're allowed a hyphen. I'll allow it.
Thanks. Okay. I'm going to call it asset management. And I think, when we think about asset management, think about it's the stuff you've already got that you need to retain and keep growing. So I'm thinking, is this like a portfolio that you are growing? And by the way, my name's my name's Arti. I work at a company called Moloco. I am actually on the new business team. So I'm a senior director on the new business team. Really, I specialize in helping agencies become true performance marketeers. That's my role here. I've been at Moloco for about a year, but I've been in programmatic for about 20 years.
Awesome. Yeah, Arti, it's great to have you. Josh.
Yes. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I'm Josh. I'm the programmatic director at M+C Saatchi. As Megan alluded to, I'm based in the London office, and I manage a programmatic team that works across both the EMEA and US market. I've now been at the company for coming on 9 years, so a good little stint, but also did start my journey in the programmatic world at M+C Saatchi. To the question about what one word I'd use to describe retention, I would say attention. Yeah, it's about showing up in a way that the user actually notices and or values. So yeah, attention.
Awesome. Love it, Josh. And Justin.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin True. I am relatively new at SplitMetrics. I've been here I'm coming up on 3 months now, but have been in the UA space for about 8 years and in digital for about 14. And, I have the least fun accent out of everyone here. So you can tell that I'm based in the US in Santa Monica, California, actually. And if I had to describe customer retention or great customer retention, one word, I would go with sustainability, because I think that great customer retention means building a business that lasts. And that means growing a business efficiently and as profitable as possible, but that comes with building brand loyalty and is grounded in long-term relationships with the right users.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks to all the speakers for joining us today. And we're really excited to get stuck into what's going to be a really valuable discussion that's covering, why re-engagement in the first place, the challenges that we as marketers and as brands face, moving into a framework that works moving forward, 2026 and beyond, and then even more so in a broader sense, the future of retention. But before we get stuck into our discussion, we'd love to start with a quick poll so we can understand from the audience's perspective. There should be a poll popping up on your screen shortly. We'd love to know, how often are you currently including re-engagement campaigns in your customer retention strategy? So if you guys are able to respond to that quickly, it's always a valuable metric for us to understand and help tailor this discussion to make sure that you're able to get the most value out of it. So we'll leave that there for about 30 seconds, and then we can move into the discussion. Cool. I mean, for anyone who hasn't answered yet, you can keep doing so while we get stuck into the questions. And Arti, I'd love to start with you. Moloco is one of the sort of leaders in not just UA, but retention as well. And you've stated before that re-engagement isn't marketing, it's asset protection. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I think when we think about marketing, and these tend to be like most of the conversations I'll end up having with my customers as well, it's always about growth, and it's always about acquisition and chasing the new user. But if you only think about acquisition, that's not very sustainable, because what's happening is you're losing the ones you've already gained and you've already paid for. And so when I'm saying about like asset protection, I'm actually talking about protecting that investment, and really thinking about like, how do we show up for the users who's already shown interest? How do we make sure that we're keeping that communication alive? And what we also know from like multiple campaigns that we've run is when you actually run a re-engagement campaign, should I say, or a campaign that basically shows that you had a user who showed interest, maybe you haven't quite got them as a full customer yet, to bring them back is actually 5 times cheaper than gaining a new customer. And they tend to have like 150% higher retention rate. So just that alone like shows you how powerful it is to make sure you've got it within your strategy. And I don't know, just to make it in like simple context, and just because it's more fun, but I like to always compare things to dating world and dating app. But in the very swiping culture that we're in, if you were just sitting there on a dating app and you just kept swiping and matching a load of people, that's great. But if you don't actually create a conversation with them and create like a deep connection with them, you're never going to actually you're never going to get on a date, let alone a relationship with that person. You're never going to grow value with them. So think of this as like, I want to be able to grow value with my customers. So rather than just seeing it like as marketing spend, think of it as like asset protection, safeguarding your value, and like really maximizing it through that like data-driven re-engagement program.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's such a powerful statistic, and one that's easily forgotten around. Like, it's so much cheaper to keep and nurture a customer than it is to keep going out and getting new ones. And even when you factor in, the acquisition costs are rising across the board, not just in the US, but globally as well. Of course, due to, macroeconomic forces, but also the signal loss that's been steadily advancing, since the invention of scan. Google's will they, won't they? I think it's a won't they right now. But it's all been driving up the costs of acquiring new customers, which again makes that re-engagement side all the more important. So, I mean, Justin, we can start with you. Like, how can marketers combat, what we'd like to call the leaky middle, which is getting those new customers in, but they're predominantly sort of dropping off, and improve not only, short-term customer acquisition costs, but also keep that focus on long-term or, lifetime value as well?
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying that the reality is not all installs are created equal. So if you look at our 2025 benchmark report, it shows that app marketers who are actually optimizing towards post-install events rather than just blasting installs for scale are seeing up to 42% higher in 30-day retention. And I think that's an important call out, which shows that retention doesn't start after acquisition, but it starts with acquisition. So when we talk about the leaky middle, the first step is to make sure that we're bringing in the right users, the ones with true high LTV potential. And I think retention is still going to be king here, but knowing who those high value users are and kind of reverse engineering that UA funnel is how you're going to protect and grow that value. So I think the good news is that AI is making things much easier. I think a lot of companies are, ourselves included, are developing AI models. We've been doing it for the last 3 years, but yeah, I think leveraging AI to manage your campaigns, because they're doing it 24/7, to focus on higher LTV users to combat the leaky middle. And I think I'll end by saying this: the best way to combat the rising acquisition costs and improve long-term LTV isn't by filling the funnel faster, but by filling it more precisely, and hopefully with the help of AI.
Yeah, 100%. Josh?
Yeah, Justin makes a really good point about kind of, combating the leaky middle by not just siloing acquisition and re-engagement into separate efforts, but it really has to be like a joint strategy altogether. So again, specifically talking to like the app space, we know that fewer than 10% of installers actually become buyers, which means obviously it's critical to kind of like track and pull these users in the right way, so that essentially, when they enter that middle, we're able to retarget them and push them through the funnel, and or, to Justin's point, kind of have them entering that middle section with genuine intent. So, the key is keeping our product kind of like, front of mind post-install. You can do this with, if that's create a consistency, we can use sequential messaging, general brand presence. There's a number of different tactics we can kind of use to really build familiarity and kind of like trust with that customer. And actually, when you flip that earlier 10% stat, the opportunity becomes a little bit more clear, because we know that over 60% of users who make a first purchase actually go on to make a second purchase. That's the signal that acquisition and re-engagement like really need to work hand in hand. We need to be bringing the right users in from the start. We need to be nurturing them, and we need to be hitting them with the right creatives, with the right messages, to make sure that we're driving them through the funnel.
Yeah, I think that's the key bit. Not seeing them as mutually exclusive, UA and retargeting. I think they need to definitely complement each other. I mean, Artie, I'd love to get your point of view on that as well.
Yeah, I think Josh and Dustin have like done a good job in terms of explaining it. I think just to add, I think another stat that's also really interesting, and it's definitely what we see at Moloco, is when we're running both campaigns, generally the re-engagement not only does it generate, like I said, not only is it 5 times cheaper, but it does obviously generate higher retention. But actually nearly 40% of them will actually generate more revenue for our clients within that first month of when we start running the re-engagement campaign as well. Just showing you how powerful it is, again, to run both side by side, but just not to forget about the leaky middle. And I think I saw someone talking about when is it the right time to obviously start your re-engagement plan and etc. But one thing that we do at Moloco is what we'll actually use is we will use the signals that you already have. So we use first party data, and this is what AI does for you now, which is amazing. But you don't need to worry, because what AI will do for you is it will actually do that prediction modeling for you to understand when are users more likely to come back, when are they going to repurchase, when are they going to churn. And then as long as you're getting that, as long the DSP or the buying partner is, that's what they're there to do, to figure out when the message should go out. Now it's just about making sure that you're getting the right message out. But the buying partner, for instance, Moloco has access to 3 million odd apps. We'll make sure it's in a privacy environment. We're going to get the message to the right person at that right moment in time. So really, it's just about thinking of what is the message, and is the creative right? Is the offering right? Does that also work? But once you put that together, then you're going to end up with a very successful campaign. And the other thing to mention is I don't really like thinking of things as a funnel so much, but I like to think of things as more of a life cycle. So if you've already paid for someone to come in, and then you're continuing that life cycle journey with them, you're only going to grow with them. Versus obviously, if you think about a funnel, that is kind of what Josh was saying, or Justin was saying, is you just keep putting to the top and then the bottom just comes out. That's exactly what you don't want to do. It's think about how do you grow with your customers, the ones you've already paid for, and in the long term, it means your customer acquisition cost is going to decrease, but your lifetime value is going to be increasing. But also with all the different marketing shifts that are happening, that some are in control and some are not in control, you're going to be in a much better position as market shifts.
Yeah, exactly. I think sticking on the point of what you were just saying around, it's so important to not see it as a static kind of one size fits all approach to when is the perfect time to re-engage the user. Everyone, even though you have a core audience, there's a huge amount of diversity within them, when they like to interact, how much they'd like to interact. So that's where, AI and modeling comes in to really get granular with that. And on a similar perspective, it's the targeting as well. And as you were mentioning, twinning that with the creative. And I think that's a really important part of re-engagement as well. I think we can also agree that, targeting only gets us so far. If we're not putting the right message in front of them, there is a limit to the value that we as marketers are able to drive with this lifetime value. So in your opinion, and Josh, let's start with you, which creative elements of a re-engagement or a retargeting ad, in your opinion, truly drives, the return visits and the conversions that we're looking for?
Yeah, look, I agree. Targeting, you're right, only gets us so far. What really kind of helps drive return visits and conversions is creatives that feel relevant, to where the user is in that journey, or as Archie just said, their life cycle. You wouldn't want to show kind of a previous purchaser a new customer message. It has to align with their experience at that exact moment. Beyond that, there's a number of different things we can look at. Visual consistency, so ensuring that our creative, be that on the App Store, the website, other kind of brand touch points, are kind of very, very similar and consistent. So it builds that kind of recognition and trust. There's some basics, if that's putting time elements and countdowns and limited offers on certain creatives, again creating a bit of urgency and a push for a user to act. Utilizing formats, if that's motions, carousels, playable assets, we know kind of like statistically that these outperform statics, and they really pull users back in with kind of their interactive kind of elements. And although it's not always available, like where personalization is possible, it really amplifies kind of like all of the above. And finally, testing. Testing remains absolutely crucial for everything we do in this market, and just our line of work. Even small tweaks can kind of unlock big performance gains, and yeah, we need to structure a testing plan to ensure that we're always learning and improving.
Justin?
Yeah, just leading in from Josh's point about the importance of creative testing is, I couldn't agree more. At SplitMetrics, we know that creative fatigue starts to kick in once we start to see about 10 to 15% week over week drop in CTRs. So having a continuous cycle of creative testing isn't optional. We think it's absolutely essential. And I think that's becoming a lot more apparent now that AI is dramatically increasing the number of creatives in circulation. And I think one thing to call out there is that there's research out there showing that 49% of consumers are saying that if they see the same ad over and over, they're less likely to buy from a brand. So if you're not being careful and thoughtful with using AI, it may also accelerate creative fatigue. So we believe that creative relevance is always going to beat creative frequency. So it's important that you show the right message to the right user at the right time, because that's going to outperform hammering the same user with the same ad over and over and over again. And I think one thing to not underestimate is the power of seasonal opportunities. So how many of you got excited when I just showed this pumpkin because of what's coming up? So yeah, take that feeling, think about that, put that into your creatives. I think as we move into the holiday period, it's important to reflect the cultural relevance and emotional context of your audience. And lastly, I'll call out that it's important to have good creative hygiene. So there's a myth out there that, if you have some misleading ads or clickbaity ads, that you can get a lot of users. But taking it back to my first point about, not just trying to blast ads for installs to drive as many people as possible, because you could get a lot of short-term installs, but it's going to hurt the trust of the users that you're bringing in, and potentially the long-term retention. So if taking it back to Artie's first point of re-engagement being about protecting assets, I think creative is about integrity, and having intelligent testing is going to be how you safeguard and grow the value of your users. And if you're going to use AI to help on the creatives front, just make sure that you're still putting a personal touch on your creatives instead of flooding the ecosystem with more and more repetitive assets.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I'm not going to drop names, but there was a few examples that come to mind where I've certainly been retargeted quite a lot from certain brands, and I'm just thinking, guys, frequency capping. I think it's all about having a conversation with the audience rather than speaking at them is massively important. We've spoken a little bit about some of the challenges that we see in the market, but we'd love to hear from the audience as well, from your perspective. So we're just going to put another poll up quickly. We'd love it if you guys were able to just answer the following question. What is your biggest challenge that you face while running re-engagement campaigns through paid media? I'm sure there's probably more than one, but just pick sort of whatever speaks to you the most. It's always great to understand, directly from the audience's point of view on some of the main challenges. So we'll leave that up there for a second before we jump into some interesting solutions. Cool. So we can leave that running in the background. But going into, you know, the measurement side of things, which is really key to understanding, especially like taking this idea of asset protection, like how are we able to quantify that, which of course then feeds back into how we refine it. So Artie, I'd love to start with you. How do you measure success when you're thinking about customers as assets rather than just marketing targets?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is a difficult question as well, actually, if I'm honest. But I think one, we do need to change our mind, like our the way we actually measure things today anyway. And so yes, right now we'll measure things like installs, we'll measure CPAs, we'll measure the ROAS of the campaign. But what if we can have a nice new metric, which is like asset protection or asset growth? And like instead of asking like how many new users did we get, like maybe ask the question of what is the total value of our customer base? How is it growing and why is it growing? What's driving that growth? I think they would be much better questions to be asking, because that would actually help you understand the growth of your business. Alongside that, I do think like there are some really nice things that you could do in today's world, and some of them are around things like incrementality testing, for instance. And that really helps you understand like true lift, shall I say. So is your marketing actually creating or showing whether your campaign is genuinely reactivating or retaining customers? Or is it that just would have happened naturally anyway? So I think there's a lot of insights and data that we can be using today to build onto this like idea of like a new metric of asset protection. But I think if we're thinking about like what we have available today, I think one of the cleanest ways you can measure it is through like incrementality testing, and really understanding the true value that your actual campaign is bringing versus would it have bought it anyway. And I think then, you know, and again, it's about like a marketing mind shift as well. So don't just measure your activity, but measure what does that incrementality growth mean, and what separates sustainability marketing from like that short-term acquisition that you get and the short-term acquisition churn as well that you'll receive.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it looks like just looking at the results of the poll, thanks to everyone that answered, that attribution improving ROI is the hot topic. So definitely want to stay on this for a second. And Josh, interested for your point of view.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I think a lot of clients want to think of their customers as long-term assets, but like it's hard to do that when you're only kind of like doing the acquisition side of things, because there's still so much hesitation around retargeting, and that a big part of that hesitation comes from attribution worries. Like Artie mentioned it earlier, but there's a perception potentially that, you know, retargeting is stealing conversions from your acquisition or your organic users. But you know, there are stats to back up, and obviously we do testing, as we've kind of like alluded to with regards to incrementality. But you know, retargeting ads are up to 70% more. Sorry, people who see retargeting ads are up to 70% more likely to convert. People who see retargeting ads are 3 times more likely to click on ads. It really, like, there's so much evidence showing the real incremental value. That's why it's so important to understand the true impact of retargeting, rather than just essentially, you know, I guess, running it in the background and crossing your fingers and utilizing kind of like a last touch method, where retargeting is really going to obviously trump a lot of other acquisition campaigns in general, which is why we need to look at incrementality and testing frameworks like MMM. You know, at M+C Saatchi Performance, we've recently introduced OneView from our data team side of things, which is a new in-house MMM framework and offering, which is, you know, allowing us to really measure the true impact, not just that retargeting is having, but any of our partners and further granularities are having on, you know, our specific campaigns. So, for me, measuring success really starts with having confidence in the data. Proving that re-engagement actually is adding value, because it depends how you do it. It might not be, but majority of the time it is. But you want to prove how much you should be kind of like putting towards that, and that it's not just cannibalizing your current activity. So it's using that insight to really protect and grow these customers as assets over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's important. I mean, it's something that we've been mentioning throughout, is to not look at retargeting as that silo, and oftentimes understanding it in conjunction with your UA efforts, because we've had experiences before where we've had questions from clients and the likes, well, my prospecting is 2x my retargeting CPA, so therefore we should funnel all the money into retargeting. And we wish it was that simple, but not quite. So I'd be interested, Josh, if you've got any quick point of view on how you approach that aspect of understanding that they work in conjunction and how measurement plays into that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of those two working together, similar to what I've kind of alluded to beforehand, the measurement side is key. We can, if we're running an acquisition campaign and a retargeting campaign separately, and we're just utilizing essentially an acquisition as a metric, every single time retargeting is going to come in as a far better performer, even though it might not be providing kind of like anything from an incremental perspective. And so the utilization of, it's not just specifically only MMM. We can run any form of lift test, if that's a geo lift, a ghost bid sort of test in general, to essentially assess that impact that it's having, and essentially obviously make decisions off the back of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've covered the importance of measurement, creative targeting, having a better or more holistic mindset to how you approach re-engagement. But I think we can all agree it's moving at the speed of light. We certainly weren't speaking about AI 3 years ago, or maybe I wasn't, and I'm late to the game. But where I'm really interested to get all your perspectives on, where do you see customer retention heading in the next few years? And Josh, we'll stay on you for a sec.
Yeah, sure. When we talk about where customer retention is heading, I think one thing is clear, and that it's still extremely underutilized. The splits between some of the clients that come to us once we onboard them is quite amazing. Some people will be running 0% retention efforts, others will be running up to 90%. And when we dig into it, there's typically little understanding as to the impact that those particular retargeting efforts are having. So the challenge and opportunity is about finding the right balance. Research shows that it often takes 8 contact points for someone to decide to buy, which just highlights the importance of ongoing retention, sequential messaging, and kind of as the teams adopt these MMM and incrementality frameworks, we'll have a much better understanding of the value that it drives. It basically means that retention shouldn't be an afterthought, and it's not going to be, I think, in coming years. Strategies moving towards re-engagement as a core lever, with, as what we've alluded to before, smarter creatives, messaging, timing, and as companies really start to kind of treat re-engagement and retention as not just a side project, but a critical part of their business, then they're going to get rewards from kind of like a customer value perspective off the back of that.
Definitely. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, just to build on top of that, I think it's always been the base of a healthy business. So I know a lot of folks are sleeping on it, but definitely don't sleep on it, especially within the era of AI and the how it's leveling out the playing field by providing more teams access to data and optimization tools. I think it's going to be what separates the good apps from great ones is to be able to leverage all of this data that you now have with the partnership of AI to be able to retain the customers that you do have. So yeah, don't sleep on it.
Definitely don't sleep on it. Actually, wake up. Because the reality is like, I think there needs to be some fundamental shifts. And I really do put these into like buckets. And the first is your, and I think like between Josh and Dustin, to be honest, they've covered most of it. But the budget, like let's think about the budgets. Like right now, when we look at campaigns coming in, I would probably say most clients, 80% of their budgets is all about acquisition, and only 20% odd or so is on retargeting or re-engagement. And I think that needs to change quickly, because that is fundamentally trying to bring in new, and the ones you've already brought in, you spent money on them and then you've forgotten about them. Like, don't do that to your customers. That's a horrible experience, full stop. So let's flip that round a little bit. And I think the smart marketeers already know this and they're trying to do this. I think one thing you will see in the next few years is that changing. I think you'll actually will see a more balanced approach in terms of how budgets are being allocated, and hopefully that would also mean that teams are coming together as well. So the separation between, you know, the acquisition team and the, you know, the CRM team, a lot of the time it might be, should be coming together. And that's actually my second point. The second point is we might have to think about like organizational structures, because ultimately we do need to be a lot more cross-functional within our teams, and we should have like product and analytics and our growth teams working together so that we are building a really lovely experience for our customers as soon as they have interacted with us, because we already know the numbers are there, the stats are not lying. They do generate more revenue for us in the long term, and they're cheaper to hold on to versus not. So we do need to make sure they're not just an afterthought. It doesn't just go to the CRM team and then you get another email or something along the lines, and it's just a little bit like, oh, well, they don't care about us anymore. We do need to make sure we're nurturing our customers in that sense, and not just being like, okay, done our job, now go to the next team and see what happens. And I think the third thing is really like, is again, it's, I think what we'll move away from is, because of the power of AI, I think we'll start, is it won't be so much of a win back mentality as well. I think what we're going to find is that using AI, the systems alone are going to be able to identify users who are at risk a lot earlier. And using that data, we're going to be able to intervene with that really personalized ad that keeps it safe, that keeps people really interested in whichever product that you might be selling or service that you might be bringing to the table. And I think that is going to get even tighter and better. And ideally for the customer, that means a much better experience as well. So I think they're kind of three big shifts that we're going to be seeing. I think underpinning all of that is what we're talking about, is that measurement framework. And whether that be incrementality testing, whether that meaning a asset protection value test score, something completely new. But what it will be is, as these teams come together, as we start thinking about this, as these budgets start shifting, we will have a much stronger framework for measurement to really understand the true value of our customer and how do we grow value of our customer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all great points. I think, you know, we speak a lot about AI on the targeting or the creative side, but it's also going to drive measurement forward a lot as well in terms of that sort of predictive modeling aspect that you're talking about. So I'm definitely excited for that side of things. Last question from me before we go into the Q&A bit, and a reminder to the audience, if you do have any questions, please do submit it in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll get to those in a second. But we'll go around, Josh, Justin, and then Artie. If the attendees forget everything else that we've mentioned so far, and hopefully they don't, what is the one key takeaway that they should remember about re-engagement?
Yeah, well, Justin Arthur, you mentioned it just a minute ago, but I would say don't sleep on re-engagement. I'd treat it as an essential right now function, not an afterthought. Every day of delay translates directly into lost retention, as we've talked about the value of these customers and the erosion kind of like of that value. And these are already acquired customers as well. And a bit of a cheesy, catchy slogan would be the best time to re-engage was yesterday. And the next best time is now.
Love it. Powerful.
Cool. I'll jump in. I think if there's one thing to remember, it's that re-engagement success starts before users go quiet. And it starts with acquiring the right users in the first place. As I mentioned earlier in my first statement is that not installs are all created equal. So when you're bringing users in with real intent and long-term potential, every re-engagement dollar works harder, and your retention curve becomes the foundation of your growth. And so with AI now giving us the tools to predict those who have high LTV and being able to personalize how we reach them, it's going to make it easier to target them and learn faster from the testing that we're doing. So if you forget everything else I just said, I'll leave you with this. I think smarter re-engagement isn't just about bringing users back. It's about acquiring and keeping the right ones from the start.
Yeah. And I think if you forget everything else, just remember, like, re-engagement is like real life. I think I initially used the idea of dating swiping apps, but just to change it a little bit, but keeping on the same theme. If you think about it as like your friendships, you wouldn't spend all your time making new friends and ignore the ones that you have built a lifetime with. You'd keep them, right? You'd check in on them. You'd have deep, meaningful conversations with them. You keep them alive with you. And that's where like the real depth and the loyalty comes from. So for me, it's like, before you always think about chasing the new audience, just ask yourself, have I shown up for the people who've already said yes to me? And if you can do that, then you're probably in a much better place than you realize. If you haven't, then make sure you do the right things to do it.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks so much, guys. We've got some great questions here from the audience. And I'll start with this one. I mean, we touched on it slightly throughout, but I think it's a really important aspect of re-engagement. And that's, how can we define the perfect time to re-engage the user? Is it waiting until they're inactive? And what's our approach to testing and comparing different options? Josh, interested for your point of view.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and we can kind of like go back, as you mentioned, to a couple of points made earlier, and I also have like an additional stat. But I mentioned that less than, if we again go back to kind of like apps and app activity in general, less than 10% of installers end up buying. And another stat on top of that is the average installer buys 3.6 days after installing. And so it just really shows the importance of driving those users. I know we've talked about the quality of users that's coming in and everything along those lines, but like a lot of the most impactful retargeting is going to occur as like soon as that user, be that has installed, has gone onto the website for the first time, anything along those lines. And so it also goes back to kind of like what I was mentioning with regards to this hesitancy people have around running retargeting because it steals conversions. And yes, if you do start a retargeting campaign and you've only been running acquisition, your acquisition campaign is going to like look worse than it did beforehand, because some of those conversions are going to come into the retargeting cycle and the kind of like spend you're going to be associating to it there. But that's why we need to test. And so I guess like to actually answer this question is, what is the perfect window? It's going to be different for every single essential partner, vertical, client in general. And that's why we need to test. like continuous inactivity windows, be that if you're saying we're not going to retarget someone for the first 60 days or whatever that would be, like, it is not impactful retargeting. You can have kind of like a good impact for lapsed users, dormant users, anything along those lines in the long term. But, you know, staying present with a user straight after they've interacted with your brand is extremely important. And that's why we have incrementality to prove the worth of these. And also, I guess, just to the second part, we have tested this. And although kind of like, again, retargeting will look better from a classic last touch attribution side of things, the incrementality of showing users soon after they've interacted with your brand for the first time is evident in there. So I think the answer is it's going to be shorter than you think in terms of the inactivity window in which you should utilize, if there even is one, for utilizing retargeting.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of on a similar note, going back to the frequency sort of capping or management that we were talking about earlier, we've got a question here that's about how we define a healthy frequency for a re-engagement campaign. So what are we looking at? How are we, I mean, I guess we can start from the DSP side, Artie, if you've got a point of view here. Like, how does that work for Moloco? I'm sure it's quite fluid in the way that it changes, but interested to get your perspective.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at like re-engagement campaigns, I think we really do need to be clear on the goal. So are we trying to win back like lapsed users? Are we trying to drive repeat purchases? Are we trying to increase loyalty? Like, I think we need to be really clear on what the goal is there for. And then when we think about like how and when, that if we can understand the goal and the metric that we're trying to achieve, actually what's really great is the DSP itself will take that first party data audience that has been collected, and it can start really segmenting that for you. So it can actually start really understanding, okay, well, user might have downloaded the app, but they never actually opened the app. User might have downloaded the app, made the first action, but never quite put something in the cart, but never actually quite got to purchasing the product. So when it starts picking up on those patterns, the AI itself is going to be able to start predicting as and when and how much and how often should these ads be seen, because that's the power of it. And if you actually do work with a strong DSP that basically has a great AI behind it, the great thing is you don't, as a marketer, you don't need to worry so much about that, because it does the hard work for you based on the data set that you're providing it. So as long as the data set that you're giving it is strong, the results at the end of it is also going to come out strong as well. So that's why I think it's just a couple of things just to think about when we're talking about these types of campaigns is, like, be clear on the goal. Like, what is it that you really want to be achieving? Make sure that the data you're sending in is strong. Make sure like the creative and the messaging on the creative is relevant to the goal that you're trying to achieve as well. So the campaign is set up correctly. Make sure that you are choosing the right DSP that has the right inventory out there for you as well. Do you need to apply frequency caps? To be honest, if you're actually working with a really strong DSP, I'd actually say no, you don't need to apply frequency caps. What that DSP should be able to determine what the right frequency cap is based on the goal of the nature of the campaign. And so you shouldn't be overexposing your users, and you shouldn't be having that experience. I think, Megan, you mentioned it in the beginning that you was, and it's quite annoying, and I totally agree with that. But the right partner won't let that happen to you. So I think there's a lot of due diligence that needs to be done as a marketeer to figure out, who are you actually working with? Who are you partnering? Are you asking them the right questions with regards to how do they set up the campaign? How are they going to market? Are they with the right supply partners? These are the things that you do need to do before you even think about the very basics thing, like running the campaign. Get the right partners in place.
Yep, couldn't agree more. I think we've got time for one last question, which someone's asked, what should my approach if my retargeting campaign goal is to target dormant users that have installed but haven't yet done any engagement? Justin, we can start with you.
I'm also happy.
Jump in, yeah.
I'm happy just chiming in. That's all right. So it falls a bit more in my wheelhouse. Yeah. So essentially, there are multiple different tactics that we kind of refer to as like recency when we refer to like how long a user has been, if that's dormant or lapsed or anything along those lines. And so we obviously want to assess, that data pool, see how many users are essentially falling into that dormant bracket, how much kind of historical data we have, and then we'll likely be kind of working on a strategy to segment those into different pools and buckets, and applying essentially our strategy, targeting, and different campaign approaches accordingly. So the approach needs to be to segment those users according to the data in which you have, and apply obviously the relevant creatives and everything else, obviously platform that can actually provide that service as well, and execute from there.
Awesome. So I think that's all we've got time for today. Again, thanks first to our wonderful speakers, but also all of you that have joined. We do have a quick survey that should be popping up on your screen shortly. This is a series that we do at M+C Saatchi Performance. We put on webinars quite a lot. So we always love to get any feedback that you may have as we look to refine these moving forward, to make sure again that as you're choosing to take the time to join these, which we really appreciate and love, that they're the most valuable for you. And again, if there's anything that we didn't quite get to or something you want to learn more about, we are always happy to chat about all things re-engagement. And you can see an email there at the bottom of the slide, marketing@mcsaatchiperformance.com. Please do feel free to reach out. But again, thanks to our speakers, and thanks to everyone that joined.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.